like if you own a property long enough, you are going to have these nightmares.
Yeah.
Friends bought a place up on the Hibiscus Coast that was rented. And clearly they know actually the owners and the tenants had a bad breakup because they're selling the house, whatever. So my friend didn't see this before they moved in. But what happened is they went around with darts from a dartboard and have punctured holes all over everything in all the jib. Just everywhere.
It's so spiteful.
Yeah.
And that's like probably...
And they're like, my friend who's bought the house with his family are like, what?
Really?
We didn't do this. Welcome to Checks and Balances, brought to you by Partners Life. I'm Mike. This is James. This is Jess. And today, why James fired as property manager. Bit of a therapy session, if you will.
Okay, so James, tell us the story. Tell us the story, because I was here watching this play out a little bit during the workday.
It's a safe space, James.
And you don't see, to be honest, like James does not get wound up by much. He's a pretty chill guy. And this is probably the first time I've seen you properly wound up. Tell us what happened.
Yeah. Well, it's triggering because the same thing happened twice.
With the same company?
So yes, the company we will not name, even though I know you're very keen to name them. So I bought my first home in I think something like 2015.
How much?
$773,000.
Cool.
You remember those extra three? Then I lived there for probably like 3 years and then moved to Wellington for work. And at that point, we rented it out. And we rented it out, used a property manager. Interesting thing with the property manager as well was they have a salesperson come along and they're like, this is the fee, this is our service, blah, blah, blah. But they never talk about they're not going to be the ongoing person. They're not actually the property manager. So that was the first thing that annoyed me a little bit was I thought they could have been a bit more transparent along those sort of lines. And so I went down to Wellington. We all know my attention to detail could be better. So I'd get the reports. I'd have a skim through the quarterly reports. And then I come back to Auckland.
What's in the quarterly reports? I've never seen one.
It's pictures of all of the rooms, notes of things that should need to change, all that kind of thing. And then I come back to Auckland. And for some reason, I was like, let's do a bit of work in the backyard, a bit of a cleanup, whatever. And the size of these weeds was impressed. Like, it was the size of the couch. It was like growing out of parts of the backyard. And
why are you like, and because I personally, when I've been a tenant, I've taken pride in the property that I live in and I look after it because I want to enjoy the property as well. That's the whole point. But as a landlord, like, why are you annoyed by that? Like, why does the weeds bother you? Because, you know, you're not living in it. So what's the issue here?
I definitely think there's an attachment to it being my first home.
Right.
And it's something that you pay for, that you've looked after, and somebody not looking after it to your standards.
And that can, the overgrowing like garden can damage the property.
It has.
Effectively.
For sure.
I will get to that.
So all these weeds are growing, and I just you're right. I try to be like a chill guy. I don't think this episode's going to go well. I think
we're going to see a different side to you.
I just lost my shit completely. Like, how can you pay somebody to, like, these weeks?
Was this when the deck was falling down as well? The tall deck?
Yeah. There was a balcony that was falling, pretty much like
rotten.
A complete health and safety hazard, and just no care whatsoever for this house. So the other thing was I could never get hold of the property manager. Like, I would call, I would text, no response ever. So I fired the bastard. Then I went on to, I got a new one, and I'm like, look, I don't think I'm high maintenance. Surely I'm not high maintenance. All I want you to do is make sure the tenant looks after the property, make sure they do their responsibility. I'm like, to be clear, are they responsible for making sure there's no weeds that go through? They're meant to look after, blah, blah, blah. Yes, James, that's what they're meant to look after. Okay, that's cool. All I want you to do is do that and answer my phone calls. I'm not going to call you.
How much are you paying these people? Like, it isn't maybe 8%. Not 8%. Like,
what is that per year?
So the rent's about $700 a week. So 7 times 5 is 35 grand.
That's 8% of that you miss out on, right? As
so
the owner.
Like
so
it's almost $3,000.
Yeah, that's right. This is all you need to do is do these couple of things, and I promise you, we won't have an issue. Because I'm also like, the property manager must be like, oh, this is like setting me up for disaster. Anyway, so I've been back in Auckland for about 4 years. And for the most part, it was all going well. In November, I got a quarterly report. The backyard was looking fine. I then get some pictures from the property manager of like, hey, the backyard's not in good state. And it was the same. I mean, you saw, bring up some pictures, Georgia. I'll give you some pictures. Bring up the pictures now of the backyard. You saw the state of the backyard. Have you seen pictures?
Yeah, I saw
yeah. You've seen pictures of the backyard. No care whatsoever, right?
No.
The fence is broken. The steps are broken. Yeah, it's a mess.
And then I go, what happened? And they were like, it's a health and safety issue at the back. The stairs aren't safe. Now, I haven't been to the property for 4 years. I don't know what's true.
This is the point of the property manager, though, correct? They're supposed to go and tell you these things.
Yeah, I don't know what's true, what's not true. And then I called property manager. I tried to be very calm. I was very firm that I was not happy, but I did not yell at her. I was like, this is unacceptable, that sort of thing. And she knew. She knew that I was coming for her, and that she got very defensive immediately. And it was like, James, I've been trying to protect you from the cost. I've been trying to protect you from the tenant. This is a health and safety issue. We've spoken about these things. Now, to be fair, they sent me a quote for a $7,000 stair with no phone call. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And I just...
Which I will say, we are about to fix this afternoon for the grand sum of like $200.
Well, it's not even that step.
Oh, isn't it? It's the other step?
It's the brick one. Yeah. So I got a quote for $7,000 for this stair, and she was like, "I've been trying to protect you." I'm like, "Protect me from what?" And she's like, "The cost." And I'm like, "I've never rejected an invoice. I just want you to look after the property."
And the issue is communication here. Like, as soon as even as a tenant, you have an obligation to share these things with your landlord. As soon as something becomes unsafe or something's wrong with the house, it can cause more damage in the long term. So you have to tell them straight away.
I can also attest to James's communication style. It's usually, of the two of us, if you get a phone call from me, it's not usually as constructive as it is from James.
Yeah, we've had examples of that over the last week.
Yeah, the last week where James has had a really positive outcome. I've been in a yelling match.
Yeah. So I fired the second property manager. It was just...
I think the rest of the response as well, which you're about to gloss over, where basically you went up a level in the company and just said, hey, I'm not getting great like service here. Something's wrong. There's clearly been an error. And then the property manager came back to you and just said, hey, James, like, I wish we could have kept this between us, but because you didn't, I don't want to speak to you anymore.
Yeah. Screw you.
So she actually fired you.
Yeah.
She said you.
Yeah, that's right. But it sounds better if I say I fired.
But she literally was like, I don't want to, like, and for lack of a better term, don't speak to me anymore. Speak to someone else.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that. So the funny thing is, Mike and I have spent the last 3 weekends at the property with a couple of guys from Student Job Search fixing it up. So the unsafe step, Jess, right? So it's got a lot of stones that roll through the backyard, and this unsafe stair. And I'm looking at the stair, and I go to Mike. I'm like, there's something under here. And in about, 2 minutes, I flicked the stones away, pulled up the pavers, ripped up the weed mat. There is perfectly laid brick stairs underneath all this crap that could have been fixed like that.
It's literally,
my
I was
gosh.
like, James, don't tell anyone this. Tell them we laid it. Like, tell them we went out and did, like, there is like, they are perfect because they've been covered up what looks like their whole life.
Yeah.
And what we do is like rip some stuff up. It's a perfect set of stairs. We were like, what?
It's just using common sense, right? And I think, like, as somebody who was a tenant for a long time and I've now bought a house, thank goodness, but I was dealing with property managers in the UK. I then had a property where I dealt directly with the landlord. And honestly, that relationship was so much better because you didn't have this breakdown in communication.
Yeah.
I really think when you've got that personal aspect of, like, say I was your tenant, I got to know you, I care about the house, you care about the house, let's work this out together. Property managers that are bad cause this breakdown in communication. That means nobody wins. Everybody's upset and all they're doing is taking their cut.
Yeah. I used to love my property manager in the UK at my last house. And there was a pipe that leaked in the upstairs shower. So it wasn't like a big leak, but every 2 or 3 months, the plaster in the living room would blow out because it was damp.
God.
So they would just send the same bloke around and he'd just cut the plaster out, plaster it, patch over, just like
That sums up
paint
the
it.
UK.
Just literally paint it and be like, job done. And he'd leave. And then 3 months later, he'd come back, cut the same panel out,
jeez.
put another one in, sand it, paint it, and be like, job done. And like, honestly, I was like, I'm not going to rock the boat here because like this house is older than my country. But, like, all right, this is how we do it. Yeah.
So funny.
So, I mean, coming back to the $7,000 quote that I got, you ripped up the weed mat, there were stairs underneath. And that's really irritated me. So Mike and I we did that. Then it took a whole weekend to remove all the weeds. The tenants so I've gone in and fixed all this stuff myself.
The tenants are actually responsible for
the
that
tenants
too.
are responsible for it.
They should be.
Hannah's giving me a very hard time about sending an invoice to somebody. Not sure who I'm meant to send it to. Send it to somebody. And then we've removed all the weeds. Mike's been really good at kind of tidying up like the box
The timber
planter,
work and stuff. Yeah.
And then we put like flaxes down, new soil down.
I
fixed
built a
up the
top step
stair,
today.
and then we've got a bunch of stones. We picked up 23 bags of stones from my tenant at 7 a.m. this morning.
And it
Sounds
is
like
like
torture.
easily the coldest day of the year.
Yeah.
It was freezing.
Yeah, all the people down in the South Island who are saying us Jaffers are cold, feel free
All
to give
the
us a
dairy
roasting.
farmers who were like, go on, mate.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah.
So aside from this causing you guys a whole bunch of work and stress, like what? So what? So now what are you going to do? What's the plan?
So, James, before we continue, I have got a special announcement.
Have you started sticking to your budget?
Absolutely not.
You finally made it as an after-hours DJ.
I wish. And the thing is, we have got a brand new podcast partner, Partners Life.
You mean the award-winning insurance provider with over 300,000 Kiwis insured?
Yep, they're also a New Zealand operated company and they are passionate about increasing financial literacy amongst Kiwis.
Sounds like a great match. Where can I learn more about them?
Check out their website in our show notes below.
Really thought DJ Magic Mike was going to be a global sensation for a second.
Good question.
It is a good question.
I mean, I love these weekends, by the way.
yeah.
Some quality time.
I do go back and forwards, like whether at some point I sell it or not. If the tenant ever watches this episode, don't worry, I'm not planning on selling the property tomorrow. But there is the question about like, do I retain it long term or not? We've got the backyard to a point where it's pretty low. It should be pretty low maintenance going forward.
Oh, it was pretty low maintenance before. There was weed mat everywhere. It was like 90% weed mat. And I hate weed mat as a horticulturalist. I'm like, it's horrible. But like, I don't know how. It's so bad for the soil. It's bad for the worms. It's bad for the plants.
There you go, Jess.
This is a side of Mike I've never seen. A
You know, we used to
horticulture.
be
I studied. I used to be a landscaper and a construction landscaper.
You did
I studied
not.
botany and horticulture. Yeah,
Wow.
and soil science.
Mind
Yeah.
blown.
Yeah,
There
I
you
became
go.
a finance bro after a few years of being a landscaper.
Learn
Yeah.
something
Realized I
new
didn't like
every
being outside all
day.
day. I definitely so Hannah's gone. Why the hell do we bother? There's probably two things I want to talk about: the property manager model. I want to talk about how to find a good property manager and the problem with this situation. And so let's maybe talk about the last bit with the problem with the situation. So Hannah goes to me, she goes, why do we bother with this? Why do we get an investment property if this is going to happen? The tenant's not going
You
to
have
look
had some
after
tough
it.
tenants previously as well.
The tenant's not going to look after it properly, blah, blah, blah. And I said to Hannah, I was like, we don't have a choice. Like, what is the alternative to doing this? To just pay down debt on the property? I refuse to do that.
Yeah.
I will deal with the pain of holding an asset for $1 million that's going to double in value over 10 years, deal with the pain of a tenant not looking after it well over a period of time, because the alternative to not doing it is we're in such a worse financial position. And
But what about like, say, a managed fund? Like, say that we could, people would be like, okay, you've got the stress of this property. I could just invest in shares and be growing my wealth. Like, what's the difference there?
Well, there's two aspects to it. There's what if you have a mortgage? So if you have a mortgage on your own home, you shouldn't be investing into managed funds. Because if you make 10% on managed funds, you take off 1% for fees, you're at 9, 3% for tax, you're at 6, 3% for inflation, you're at 3, your mortgage rate's 7%. So you shouldn't be doing that. The second component is at our stage of life, property is so much more attractive than shares. And this is a guy who's Switzerland between the two. We have options where we advise clients on shares, options around property. Client to client will tell people to do different things.
Yeah.
But in our situation, it's the power of leverage.
Yeah.
It's the
Right.
power of, instead of me saving $1,000 a month, I can turn the equity in my home into $1 million asset. And you can't go and borrow that money from the bank.
Yeah, you're right.
Right.
And it's like, again, it's you with everything there is a sacrifice, and sometimes that sacrifice is a bit of emotional damage and some time. But it's in the long term, you will be better off if you're at this age and stage if you're doing property first before you move
If
into
you
managed
can.
shares.
And so you've explained that you and Hannah have had that conversation. Do we get rid of it? Is it worth the stress? You've explained, yes, it is
Yep.
worth the
Yep.
stress.
The other piece I wanted to talk about with this is all of the clients where they go, I've had a property before, I've sold
give up.
it, and we don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And after going,
Or even worse, no, my mum and dad had these terrible tenants in the 60s and the 80s or 90s or whatever. We don't want to go near it anymore. Yeah.
Oh, so that's not even their experience.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
what they've seen. Right.
Generational rental trauma.
No, my God. It's that bad. Wow.
yeah. But you think about, I
I
get
hear that though. People do say that.
Yeah, but you think about how much money those people
Yeah.
have lost.
Mm.
So that's probably the big piece is tenants. Like if you own a property long enough, you are going to have these nightmares.
Yeah.
I mean, on top of that, you think about the examples where you have like people cooking meth in kitchens, people, squatters in houses.
In the grand scheme of things, your story, even though it has triggered you, it's actually probably not as bad as it.
Oh,
it's not
we
the
had someone
house,
who
it's the
bought,
backyard.
what was it, a
Yeah.
whole lot of units down in New Plymouth, and before they moved out, all the tenants around smashed every window.
Brilliant.
My friends bought a place up on the Hibiscus Coast that was rented, and clearly they know actually the owners and the tenants had a bad breakup because they're selling the house, whatever. So my friend didn't see this before they moved in, but what happened is they went around with darts from a dartboard and have punctured holes all over everything in all the jib, like everywhere.
It's so spiteful.
Yeah.
And that's like probably.
And they're
indicative
like,
of
my friend who's bought the house with his family are like, what?
Brilliant.
Like, we didn't do this. Like, yeah.
It's so frustrating. And so you're going to hang on to your property. You're going to like push through it. But what if people don't do that? What's the wider impact that can have if people are all like, if no one's investing in property, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, from a societal perspective, there's an impact that we don't have enough people, places for people to live.
Yeah.
Because KO and the government can't provide enough housing. In terms of the individual, once again, house prices over the long term go up 5% a year, will double over a decade.
Never sounded less excited about an asset doubling in 10 years in your life. Right?
the trauma.
But you are, it's the trauma. Generational trauma. But emotional damage. But the big thing is you're just going to be in such a worse position financially. So if you think about what the impact might be, you hear me talk about this with every single client. All clients want the same 4 things, right? They want to live in a certain house, have a certain lifestyle now, retire at a certain age, give their kids a head start in life. It has an impact on all of those things by not following through with the strategy.
Sure. And so to avoid all of this breakdown in communication, like we're looking for a good property manager because I'm sure they exist. I'm sure they're out there. So how do we find them?
Sequoia Property Management.
Some shout outs.
Yeah. If you could find me a great property manager, and I'd be interested to hear people's experiences as well. Have you had a good property manager? Have you had a bad property manager? Have you had a horrible tenant? Tell us in the comments.
Or
about your
even if
stories.
you've just watched that show Renters on TV too,
Oh,
and
what's
they're in like
that?
Invercargill or Dunedin or whatever, and the lady with the purple hair goes around, and these people have just trashed the houses.
Oh, I
and
haven't
she's
seen
like,
that.
and she gets in like full on fights with them where they're like, these like gang members are like yelling at her, and she's like this little old lady, and she's like, get out of here.
Oh my God.
Chase them around with a broom. So the thing I've got is because the property manager model is all based on volume. So to have a profitable business, you need to have X amount of tenants and not too many people.
with the minimal amount of staff.
Yeah, not with too many people to make it profitable. That obviously means as each person comes on, the individual's experience gets
Slightly
worse.
worse.
They're
because
spreading
you've got-
themselves thinner as they go.
You've got less time. I'm sure there are good property managers out there. I just haven't met them yet.
Sequoia
Wow.
Management, Alex Brown, absolute legend.
Oh,
There you go.
nice little shout out.
Cool.
Yeah. So look, have I had some emotional damage through this experience? Yes. Do I understand why people would stop investing into property because of this? And for, like you alluded to, much worse experiences than I've had. Yes. Is there an alternative? No, you must hold the line. You must get it done because the implications are far too big.
Do I love these weekends where me and James get to be builders and I wear a tool belt and we build steps? Yes.
Yes, have I told you about the time Mike and I built a deck?
Oh, I have. Is this the nails?
Everyone's heard about it 1,000 times.
I feel like that's been on the podcast.
Shout
at
out
least
to
3
Partners
times.
Life. Let's wrap this one up, Jess.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Partners Life, for sponsoring this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.